Hey everybody, it's Miss Clifford. I'm really excited about today. Happy Black History Month. I didn't get to see you guys yesterday to say happy first day of Black History Month, but that's okay. So, if you guys didn't already know, science is tied to everything. Um, we use science just to live our daily lives. It connects to history, being able to reason things out. It connects to English. You need to be able to use the language to describe what you find. Woo! And it explains why we sneeze. But neither here nor there. I wanted to show you how history and science also go together as we learn about some Black history today. Historians, timelines, and hopefully how you can use like diagrams like these for science in the future. So let's get started and get you right to your assignment. All right, so you guys are on week 17, Black History Month historian. We're going to learn about Martin Luther King Jr. a little bit, a historian, and timelines. So when you go to your assignment here, you'll see that you have your tab there, so you can open up your Google Slides and participate in the assignment. All right, if you guys aren't here yet, it's okay. Pause me, make sure everybody's situated, and then let's go together. We'll start here. Our Power Up adventure is historian, Martin Luther King Jr., and timelines. So first, what I really want to know is why is Black History Month important to you? Now, you don't have to be Black for Black History Month to be important. So if you're not really sure why, maybe think about a way that it impacts you or your life, or maybe somebody that you know. Is there anybody that Black history helps to inspire or helps to keep informed? Why might we need such a thing as Black History Month, or like McDonald's does, 365 Black History? Take some time, fill it out. I can't wait to read your thinking. All right, so you're done. You guys can leave me a chat or a comment if you really want me to read your response. But Black history to me is really important because, well, I grew up in a lot of different places and there weren't always people around that looked like me. Of course, I had my family to be inspiring and to help me find myself. But it wasn't until I went to college that I really got to be around a lot of people that I thought I had a lot of similarities with, but also a lot of differences. And I think learning both about my heritage or my ancestors, but also the ways that things are different, um, kind of plays a role in how I see the world. We're always working to make it better. And if we can learn from the past, I think we can really make sure that we have a great future rather than repeating the mistakes of the people who came before us. And that's why I think it ties to science, because the way that science works is as you figure out something or learn a new discovery or find out that there's other planets or stars in the galaxy or discover a new name for Pluto and take it off the planet list, everybody's always making a new discovery or coming up with a new idea. And if you do that, then you can make sure you are able to share that with the next people and they can keep building on those findings, such as way back when gigantic computers to now having laptops and cell phones and phones and watches. So we're going to see how understanding history can also help us in science. So today we are going to go on an adventure to learn about historians, Martin Luther King Jr., and timelines. So as a quick vocab recap, a historian is a person who studies people and events from the past. Martin Luther King Jr., he was a person who led during the civil rights movement. A timeline is a list of events in the order that they happened. So let's learn about historians. Historians are people who study people and events from the past. Some historians teach history classes, write books, or work in museums. If you think like a historian today and create a timeline of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, then you'll learn about civil rights and Martin Luther King Jr., about timelines, and be able to create your own timeline. So first, let's learn about civil rights and Martin Luther King Jr. Here I'm going to play a short video. It's only about 3 minutes, but I hope that it teaches you about civil rights and Martin Luther King so you can do the timeline.
Hi, everybody. Meet Corbin. Corbin is a historian. Historians study important people and events from the past. Historians have a lot of different jobs. Some historians write books. Other historians work at museums. Corbin works at a museum, but today he is not going to the museum for his job. Instead, he is going to a school to make a presentation. First, Corbin visits a first grade class. He asks the students if they have ever heard of Martin Luther King Jr. A few students raise their hands. Corbin tells the class that Martin Luther King Jr. was an activist. An activist is a person who works hard to change something that is wrong or unfair. Next, Corbin explains that many years ago, people with Black skin were not treated as well as people with white skin. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted everyone to be treated the same. He said that it wasn't fair if people were treated differently based on the color of their skin. Because Martin Luther King Jr. did not think this was fair, he wanted to change it. He decided to give speeches about equality. Equality is when people are treated the same, no matter who they are or how they look. Corbin shows the students a photograph of Martin Luther King Jr. speaking to a huge group of people in Washington, D.C. He explains that Martin Luther King Jr.'s most famous speech was called the I Have a Dream speech. During this speech, Martin Luther King Jr. talked about many dreams he had for equality in America. Corbin also explains that Martin Luther King Jr. was a gentle activist. He was a church pastor who did not believe in fighting or hurting others. Instead, he found peaceful ways to teach people about equality, like giving speeches or marching with signs. At the end of Corbin's presentation, a student raises her hand with a question. She asks why some schools are closed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Corbin says that the third Monday in January is a special day to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and hard work. Some schools are closed so that people can remember and celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Corbin explains that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is in January because his birthday was January 15th. Corbin sure enjoyed speaking to the class about the wonderful work of Martin Luther King Jr. Teaching students is Corbin's favorite part of being a historian. Now it's your turn to be a historian. Let's go on an adventure. Hi, everyone.
There we go. So, if you did know some of those things about Martin Luther King, then I hope you know it now. And if you knew all of those things, then hopefully just refresh your memory so you can put the order of events together and even fill in some of your own details. I know you might be thinking that there are things going on in our world right now that seem like they came from that time, which really wasn't that long ago. We're always making changes, we're always growing, and it's really important to think back about what was happening then and what's happening now and see if there's any way to solve it. So the civil rights movement was the effort to make all people equal, no matter what their skin color is. Equal means that everyone is treated the same. Before the civil rights movement, people with black skin were not treated the same as people with white skin. For example, African Americans were not allowed to go to the same schools or even use the same bathrooms or water fountains as white people. Martin Luther King Jr. was an important leader who helped fight for equality during the civil rights movement. He made speeches to large crowds and led protests and marches to show that the way African Americans were being treated was wrong and should be fixed. Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the best way to fight for equality was to use peaceful protests. Peaceful protests are ways to fight against something in a way that doesn't hurt others. Even today, there are some people who use peaceful protests to try to fight for a certain cause, um, to defend things or people that they feel are unjustly treated, and try to promote change. Martin Luther King organized marches and speeches to fight against the unfair treatment of African Americans at his time. So now we learn about timelines. Timelines are a way to show events that happen using a picture or words. You can put events in order based on how the way that they happened. For example, let's read about Kendra's day. Then we'll look at the timeline she created to show the order that her day went. So Kendra brushed her teeth as soon as she woke up this morning. Next, she changed out of her pajamas and into her clothes for school. Then she ate breakfast before she got on the bus to go to school. So Kendra put the toothbrush in the first box because the first thing she did. The school bus, of course, goes last because it's the last thing she did. And the other ones are in order. Oops, sorry, I skipped one. So Damien decided to make a timeline about his life. So rather than just doing a day, you can span a timeline over years, centuries. You can even do seconds, like if you were in a science experiment and trying to test things and see what happened in order, you could do a timeline to show the reaction. So he showed when he was born in 2005, when he started walking in 2006 at 1 year old, and then when he moved to a new house with his family 2 years later. We know that the first big event is that he was born, so that goes first. Next thing is learning to walk, and finally moving, which will go in the last box on the timeline. So let's learn about the important dates of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. You're going to use these to make the timeline on the next slide, so you want to pay attention. January 15th, 1929 is when Martin Luther King Jr. was born. You're like 1929, right? It's almost 100 years ago. September 1st, 1954. King becomes a pastor at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. August 28th, 1963, he gave his I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial. So again, that's not that long ago. If you go up 40 years from 63, that's 2003. And then up another 10 years past that is 2013. And now 2 years from now, it'll be only 60 years back. In April 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed by being assassinated. So here's you're going to create your timeline to show his life. 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. See if you can drag the pictures into their box based on their date and the order that they happened in Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. You can pause me here so you all have time to try it. All right, let's see. What did you guys find? If you're thinking, well, first he has to be born, well, you're on the right path. So I'll drag over January 15th, 1929 being the earliest date and the first thing in his life. Then what happened? Did he die right after that and then go on to give a speech? Nope. Did he give his speech or did he become a pastor first? Well, you can look at the dates. 1954 comes before 1963. So first he becomes a pastor, and then he goes on to give his famous speech at the Million Man March. And only 5 years later, he lost his life, and the people who loved him and respected him continued his legacy. The following activity is going to be optional. You are welcome to stop here, talk about more things that you know or have learned about from Black history. Maybe you know who Ruby Bridges is, or you've heard about Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. See if you know any other things that aren't more of the typical school discussions. Do you know who Lewis Latimer was? Do you know some famous athletes who broke records, broke barriers? Babe Ruth, or I'm sorry, not Babe Ruth, Robinson, Jackie Robinson, and anybody else who didn't just sit back when things weren't fair or equal. I want you to write here about how you could make the world a better place. During Martin Luther King's time, African Americans were not treated equally because of the color of their skin. And today, it doesn't always feel like that is a reality even now. It was important to him to fix this problem and make sure that everyone is treated the same. He did his best to try and fix the problem by working with others, writing speeches, organizing and leading marches, and encouraging peaceful protests against racism. Think of a problem in the world that you think is important and needs to be fixed. I want you to write or draw in the thought bubble below. And then you can write or draw 2 ways you can use to help fix the problem in the orange box. It's one thing to always point out the problems in the world around us. It's a completely other thing to really take action and try to fix it, even if that action is to come up with an idea and share it with others. So if you can think of a problem, even if it's the same problem that they had 60 years ago, how would we fix it today? What can you do? What can you and the people around you do? What can you encourage the world to do? When you're done, then we're all set. Share your answers. And of course, I will love to see what you guys come up with. Lots of problems, lots of wonderful people like you guys to help make the world better. All right, I'll see you guys next time and have a good one.